Okay, so I, as I mentioned in when I introduced myself, I said I studied bryophytes with Rudy Schuster, who at the time he was the author of the multi-volume work on bryophytes, liverworts of Eastern North America. He was quite a character. One of the things he liked were he liked evolutionary scenarios. He liked to imagine how liverworts or bryophytes went from being simple amorphous water organisms to coming out on land. And he always imagined some sort of the force that was kind of pushing them onto land, or goosing them. He liked to say they were goosed onto land, which was a great visual. But anyway, so continuing on that, the title comes from, I was imagining, okay, whoever was in charge of this sea of proto-organisms, the proto-bryophyte, called the bryophyte into their office and said, okay, we're going to give you a chance to go on land. And you're going to go on land, but you're not going to have any vascular tissue, so you're not going to be able to grow very tall. You're not going to have bark or wood or anything like that. You're only going to be able to grow a few inches tall. And also, you're not going to have flowers. You're not going to get any help from pollinators or seed dispersals to move yourselves around. You're going to depend on water for all aspects of your sexual reproduction. So that's the way it is. But and the proto-bryophyte said, "Yeah, well, if you would just give me Gemmy, give me some asexual means of reproduction, I think I can work around all of that." So that's my origin, part of my origin story, whimsical origin story of the bryophytes. But there's no question, putting whimsy aside, there's no question that asexual reproduction is more important in bryophytes than it is in just about any other group of organisms, given the limitations of their particular lifestyle. So here, for those of you who this need a review, this is a diagram with a life cycle of a typical bryophyte. Start out in the middle with a germinating spore, which produces a young leafy gametophyte that has rhizoids and then a leafy structure up above. And at some point on that leafy structure, at some time, will develop sex organs, male sperm and antheridia, and eggs in structures called archegonia. And then the sperm, which are motile, are carried to the archegonium. Fertilization happens, and then we get the sporophyte that grows right out of that archegonium to produce a seta and a capsule, a green capsule, which eventually opens up and disperses the spores. So that's the whole life cycle. The part in the circle, that's where the gemmy stuff happens. The gemmy are only found on the gametophyte phase of the life cycle, never on the sporophyte. So uh, well, let's just move on. So I said the word Gemmy. Gemmy is sort of one type of asexual reproduction. It's actually quite much broader topic in bryophytes. Basically, the way they grow, the kind of clonal growth that they have is a means of asexual reproduction in itself. Plants grow, they branch. The branches become dissociated from the main stem to form a new plant, and then those branches dissociate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of how sort of a sphagnum bog forms, just by kind of clonal growth. Um, Also, fragmentation. It's pretty well known in the moss growing world that you can take a moss, put it in a blender, and then put those cells out on an appropriate medium, and each cell can become a new plant. So basically, they can just get ground up, stepped on, whatever, blown by the wind, and if they land on an appropriate place, a whole new plant can grow. It only works with gametophytes, doesn't work with sporophytes, except the spores themselves, of course. And the question that I've been contemplating, which maybe we can come back to in the discussion, is if that's so easy, if fragmentation is so easy, any cell can break off a new plant, why bother with all this other elaborate stuff that I'm going to tell you about? But anyway, that's a question just to keep in the back of your mind. So in addition to clonal growth and fragmentation, bryophytes go out of their way to produce specialized structures that are designed for asexual reproduction, meaning that is that a piece of the gametophyte just breaks off, grows another gametophyte without the production of egg and sperm and so forth. So some propagula are actually just dehiscent parts, leaves or leaf parts. But then they are also uh, specialized bodies that are not stems or leaves. And there's a range of these, and we'll go through them. We'll show you examples of all of these. So one type of propagule is are deciduous or flagelliform branches. This is little branches that grow up that are different looking than the main stems. This is Dicranum flagellare, and you can see the typical dicranum looking leaves, and then you see these little erect branches where the leaves are small, they're not typical, and the stems are growing upwards, up above the surface of the soil. So these are not just young branches that are going to leaf out. That's what they look like. And these are meant to dissociate easily from the plant, and each one can become its own plant. In the liverworts, we have flagelliform branches too, but we also have special in certain species. There's a particular dehiscence of the leaf lobe. They call them caducous leaf lobes, that is responsible for propagating asexual propagation. There's actually a little dehiscent layer forms when the leaves become mature, and they just break off kind of at the same place all the time. So it's a definitely an intentional. It isn't just that that's an old plant or that it had some rough treatment. It's what's meant to happen, or these leaf lobes fall off. One of the things that mosses do, they produce a rather elaborate, probably the most elaborate type of gemmy is these rhizoidal tubers that you find a lot in the Bryaceae. Where it's a ball of cells with a kind of a hardened coating on it, and they're often attached to the rhizoids or the stems of the moss. And they've always been thought that they are like a tuber, that they will allow the moss to kind of withstand some very harsh, dry times because they've got what appears to be kind of a water resistant coating around them, and it's a bundle of cells in a ball. And This paper that's shown here is a study that it's true that you can hold them for a long time um, uh, before without growing, and they will germinate again. So the tubers of Rhosholobrium capillare germinated after 30 years of desiccation. So it seems like a pretty effective way. Rhizoidal tubers, I have a hard time seeing them sometimes. Um, when they're brightly colored like this, it seems very obvious, but I don't know. I find myself teasing through a lot of lower stems of bryophytes, hoping for tubers, and often not finding them. And I just don't, and species that should have them. So I don't think my technique is particularly good for finding them. Oops, sorry, wrong way. Just another example of a tuber. This is a moss from China that produces rhizoidal tubers, and they call them tubers and gemmy. I'm not sure whether that depends on how many cells there are, but this produces gemmy that are off the rhizoids that are elaborately branched and quite complicated. So there's a wide range of things that could be called tubers. It's hard to tell whether these have a sort of an outer coating that's protecting the contents, but maybe they do. In the genus Pollia, then I'm sure some others as well, but this is where I know it from. There are these little plantlets called bulbils that are produced in the axils of leaves in some species. And in the New Mexico key that Kelly and Russ and Karen, or the book that they're responsible, the key that into there are character for certain species of Pollia. these bulbils and their shape, their structure is used to tell them apart. So they have taxonomic importance. Um, and they're just like little miniature balls of plants that you can that can fall off and form a new one. And they are generally pretty easy to see. You might mistake them for a branch primordium. That would be one thing that could be confusing. But once you've seen one, you kind of know it. Canardia compacta is another moss we have in Colorado, and I guess pretty widespread. It produces um, like multicellular gemmy from the leaves, from the cost of the leaves, and also I've seen it on the lamina itself, just like a line of cells. Um, And then in Centrichia papilosa, here's this is the apex of a leaf where the margins of the leaf are kind of enrolled, and we see these globs in the middle, and those are, I think, unicellular gemmy that are then released and can start a new plant. And another variation on that is here in this species of Oedipodium, where again you see these look like multicellular gemmy that are produced kind of looks like along the costa. So they can take many, many forms. Um, a moss that many people know, and they know it because they see the gemmy, is the golf ball on a stick, as my advisor used to call it, Olecomnium palustri, or androgenum, where you have a shoot that sticks up above the level of the mosses, and on that are these multicellular kind of ellipsoid structures, which are the gemmy. And Tetraphis pellucida, a moss that's better known in the East. I guess it does occur here. I've never seen it. Where again you have what they call splash cups. The idea being that a drop of water will hit it and these gemmy will be dispersed. Um, In the liverworts have much more are go in more for a variety of different shapes of gemmy. They are most commonly produced in the leafy liverworts on the apices of the leaves. This is Noelia curvifolia, East Coast or Midwest to East liverwort, and you see along at the tips of these leaves are chains of single cells. Each one of those is a gemma. Um, but they're not always just one cell. In Plagiochyla virginica and in some others, they are lines of cells, and they may not be just at the apex. They may be across the surface, or at least the distal surface, the outer edge of the leaf surface. And in the genus Radula is commonly known for having discs of gemmy, little round like frisbees that attach to the margin. This is in the liverwort family Scapaniaceae. Gemmy become very important taxonomically. This is about the Russia Far East, but it shows the wide range of gemmy that you can find within Scapania, which is a very large genus, and Macrodiplophilum, which it does, isn't much in North America, but apparently more in the Russian Far East. But here you see ranges in sizes, in shapes, in ornamentation. Some are angular, some are sort of just elliptical. Um, so Gemmy become very important taxonomically, at least within some of the big and very difficult groups of leafy liverworts. So thank goodness for Gemmy, because morphologically often these plants are extremely frustrating. So here you see in the genus, in the species Scapania nemoria, which is very common in the East Coast, and you see the same phenomenon here in Colorado and other species. You see a very pale plant, and it looks like it's sort of dirty at the apices of the branches, but those are gemmy. Those are masses of brown gemmy. Gemmy can be brown, they can be reddish brown, they can be almost black. And all of those color distinctions are useful. The biggest problem is that if the plants are growing in a very shady place, they may all be green, and then you're in trouble. But so it's you can't depend on gemmy color all the time for all things. but it's why it's good to note if you're collecting a plant in a very sunny place or an unusually shady place, because that could be affecting it. Um, and Lophosia ventricosa is one of our very common mid to high elevation species in Colorado. It's again same family, the genus Lophosia, but the same family as Scapania. And you see those bright green, yellow-green balls of cells at the ends of the leaf apices. And again, very characteristic. And they, when you look at them under the microscope in Lophosia, they are angular like this. Angular, it's not confined to that genus. But again, microscopically, it's useful. Scapania, they will more often not be angular. So in Lophosia and some of its allies, they are. They're usually the number of cells is another difficult thing. Most in this group will be one or two cells, but you have to be careful because that is a species difference. At least in the genus Scapania, there's one species in Colorado that's only been collected once that supposedly has Gemmae with only one cell. But who's to say that it wasn't immature? I mean, sometimes you can be fooled. The cell wall may be very faint. So Gemmy number can be useful, but you have to be careful and look at a number of individuals and look for confirming other characters as well. Some of the more exotic types of Gemmy, on the left here, this is the family I worked on for my PhD dissertation, the Leguniaceae, and they're tropical epiphytes. They have different ways of different types of Gemmy. They basically do not, when they produce a protonema, it's not a line of cells, it's like a plate of cells. So basically these plants are, the marginal cells are reverting to kind of a protonema, and if it has the chance to grow long enough, there actually will begin to be a little shoot growing right off of the gemma, or sometimes right off of the margin of the leaf. These plants live in an area of very high humidity, and I guess it's worth the risk of producing this kind of a structure that on a leaf where there's a good chance it's going to hit a suitable substrate and germinate. Here you see some more. Then another really weird one. This is a liverwort that grows in Western North America, and I feel like I should have seen it, but I don't think I have. It used to be called uh, Solanostoma. I think it was Solanostoma or Jungermannia cespiticium, but it's now in its own genus Endogemma because it's got this peculiar thing at the shoot apex expands to a kind of a bulbous structure and it produces gemmy inside of that. So here are these structures before they've burst, and here's one in the process of bursting. And this is what the gemmy looks like. Looks like they're two-celled gemmy. So in this case, I'm sure that this is, I mean, it's been confirmed with DNA evidence, but here we see a type of gemmy that is kind of characteristic of an entire genus. And then another exotic thing, the rather common liverwort, Gymnocolia inflata, which likes to grow in very wet areas, it produces a perianth. A perianth is the structure, it's a gametophyte structure, but it surrounds the developing sporophyte, and it grows around the archegonium to protect it. In Gymnocolia, for reasons known best to itself, it produces an enormous perianth, much out of scale of the rest of the plant, two or three times the size of a leaf and so forth. And maybe one reason that it does that is that these perianths can break free, and from the perianth itself, usually from the base, it can produce a whole new plant. So a wide range of structures in liverworts have been devoted, and that's just the leafy liverworts. I'll mention the couple of the thalloids. The genus Blazia, beautiful little thalloid liverwort, has what's often described as star-shaped gemmy, and they are kind of star-shaped, but when you look closely at them, they're really just little baby plants. It's more like the bulbils of Polia than it is like the gemmy of other liverworts, but it's a little nest of tissue that's going to become a new plant. And then the iconic Gemmae, if you just Google Gemmae and bryophytes, you get good old Marcantia, which is known for its cup-shaped Gemmae, very elaborate Gemmae. Again, the splash cup model is invoked where the idea that they are dispersed by water hitting the cup, and then the Gemmae pop out and can start a new life. They are kind of just a baby plant, really. They're fully formed. They've got several layers. They've got these special oil cells that are characteristic. I'm not no, sure exactly what they do for the liverwort, but it's like a baby plant all ready to go. And it's found not just in Marcantia. Marcantia has the most beautiful little cups, but Lunularia is another genus that has that as well. And I'll just mention that ferns can have Gemmae, but at least as far as I know, and I confess I didn't do exhaustive research on this, but it's only fern gametophytes. So there's a fern in southern Appalachia called Viteria appalachiana, which is known only there, at least, from the gametophyte. And it's pretty common in places, but it's only known from the gametophyte, never produces a sporophyte, but it does produce Gemmae, which look very much like bryophyte Gemmae. So anyway, in conclusion, you will come up in keys whether or not Gemmae are present, and it can be frustrating for several reasons. I mean, you have to look carefully for them. Investigate stalked structures, erect branches, or leafless stems. If there's just a lot of stems that are leafless, that might be more than just accidental trauma. It might be intentional. Powdery surfaces, substances on the structure of the plant or the leaf apices. That's another sign of Gemmae. And you got to look carefully. You got to tear apart those stems and tear them apart carefully and look at the base for little bumps on the rhizoids. This, like I said, drives me nuts. And then leaf axils, being careful to pull off the leaves and see what might be hiding in there. And again, sometimes you might think there are no Gemmae, but if you put a leaf under a microscope, you will see just a few cells. Maybe you're seeing it in early stage. So the frustration is, and I not like I have a solution for this, is that you're keying out a bryophyte and it mentions the Gemmae, but you don't see any Gemmae. You just don't see any. So there's a good chance that you've gone wrong in the key. But how do we know that? Are Gemmae seasonal? I don't think we really know. I wish more keys, and I suppose it's because people don't really know. Like, are Gemmae common? Are they rare? Every now and then it'll say Gemmae rarely produced, and then you can say, okay, well, mine doesn't have it. That seems to be okay. But all I can say is that knowing whether or not Gemmae are present, it's not hard to identify them when you see them, but you do sometimes have to look quite a bit before you do see them. Okay, I'll stop sharing now.
Difficult.